Welcome, Ron. Thank you for joining us for this webinar and being an active participant. I think it's going to be great to get some questions in real time.
Thank you.
All right. So just to get things started off, Emily is our mark. What's your title again, Emily?
Senior Digital Content Strategist at Union Street Media. I've been here for about 4 years, and I work primarily on unpaid content, or so like SEO opposed to paid search, working on content creation, and just general organic strategy for websites.
Awesome. And my role here is as an account strategist is to ensure that you're getting the most out of your website and help you strategize with your needs and goals for your digital storefront. So I guess we'll just get started.
Awesome. Go ahead. Excellent.
All right. So when talking about like how to target out-of-state buyers, I think kind of the biggest thing we need to look at first is like, where are your current leads coming from? That kind of helps set a guide into kind of get a good sense of like where to start, because it can be kind of overwhelming, right? When thinking about the entire country, like where should I start, either targeting with my ad dollars or with content. So first things first would be to kind of look at where the leads are coming from. And we primarily do that through Google Analytics, which on the next slide. So as you can see by this map, this is just an example of one of our clients. The maps vary from client to client, obviously, but so kind of if you look, the darkest blue area is in Maine, which is where the client is located. And then you can see like there's the surrounding states, which we expect to see that, you know, your state and the surrounding states are probably going to have the most traffic coming to it. But surprisingly, we can also see that Michigan, Wisconsin, Iowa, even Virginia, Tennessee, Arizona, and Colorado, like those are a little bit more surprising. But if you think about kind of second home buyers in the market, it becomes a little bit less surprising when you think about people coming from out of state for that. So if I was this client, I would be focusing my attention on these states first, or if I had somewhere in mind that maybe I have a connection to another brokerage that we might want to be trading back and forth on relocation stuff, that would kind of be a good place to start, are on the states that we're already seeing leads coming from.
Yeah, it looks like we're getting some searches from DC up into Maine.
Yep.
Wow.
All
so
right.
you're able to use Google Analytics to see what state somebody's in that's actually searching real estate in a different state.
Correct. So, I mean, there could be differences depending on if someone's like using a VPN, say. It might like say they're from a different location, but for the most part, the average user isn't going to be using a VPN, and you can tell. It doesn't give you user data, obviously, but it'll tell you, like you can see, it says Arizona users 1. You can, if you hover over the states, it'll tell you exactly the number of people that have searched or come to your website from those states. And it'll vary, obviously, month to month, week to week. You can look at your whole year and kind of see where people are coming from. Typically, when you look at like a whole year, you do see the whole United States kind of lit up in blue, just because a lot of time goes by and people search from all over the place.
So this is an analytic you're getting specifically from having the Union Media website. You can't just go to Google and find that answer. You have to have your own site up and running, and then you start monitoring where the data's coming from.
If you have Google Analytics set up on any website, you can see this data. We make it really simple with our onboarding process to do this, but technically, if you have a website up and running today and have analytics set up for it, you could see this data for your website as well.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah, and something I think we do touch a little bit on later in the webinar is that getting people to find your website from out of state takes a lot of elbow grease and work, and a lot of websites don't support that capacity. But we'll get to that in this next slide. So this is a slide that actually we built for someone just to show an example of what's happening in New Hampshire right now in real estate, because they were curious if there was any opportunity to target buyers outside of New Hampshire, or specifically the lakes of New Hampshire. And this is a representation that not only are people searching, they're searching at a higher rate than they ever have, and they're converting at a significantly higher rate than they did even just last year. The blue dots show you where most of the search traffic is coming from. So it looks like New York, Boston, Massachusetts, and the surrounding areas. It looks like a little bit of the Cape we're getting some searches on as well. So this is just a representation of how much opportunity is left on the table if you're not targeting out-of-state buyers.
Especially if you're in a more rural community right now. We know through the data that we're seeing people kind of move from the larger city regions to kind of the second home markets. Since people are working from home, it's a little bit more secluded. We've been seeing a lot of data suggests that people are searching from out of state more now than ever.
Yeah, that's a great point. I speak with a lot of brokers and agents on a daily basis, and one thing that has come up in almost every conversation is I can't keep listings. I'm selling them sight unseen. People are asking for Matterports, they're asking for videos, and they're coming up from Boston, Massachusetts. They're coming up from Florida. They're coming in from New York. They're coming from all over the country right now.
We've seen that as well, where buyer clients are out of state. And what's different is they used to just assume they were going to fly in, and now they don't want to fly in, and they don't even want to travel until they know there's a house that they're actually interested in buying. And then I think, well, maybe we'll just put it under contract, and then we'll fly in and see it after we've got it under contract. And that's a pattern that I think is happening all across the country.
Definitely. Yeah, we've definitely seen that across our clients in all different markets. It's not really just in one area that we're seeing, like it's a trend that we're seeing all across the country, as you said, which is really interesting.
Yeah, that's some great insight, Rob. Appreciate that. All right. So how are they searching?
Yeah, so now that we know that there are buyers coming from out of state, how are they searching and kind of what can we gain from that knowledge? So we'll go through kind of like the funnel system and starting with like a generic search like homes for sale in New Hampshire and moving into more specific searches like waterfront homes for sale in Ryan, New Hampshire with, I believe, what is that? Sorry.
With a doc?
With a doc, thank you. Sorry, my video stuff is covering that section, but all right, next slide, please. So this is the sales funnel and kind of goes through how a user kind of works through the process. So the top of the funnel is the awareness stage. This is when people are searching for kind of like resources, like mortgage rates or buying a home in New Hampshire, like first time buyer, second home buyer, like landing pages. So that's kind of like the generic kind of, I'm just looking for information. Don't really know if I want a home yet. This is like a great place to kind of start building out content, and we'll touch on content in a second here. So it starts with like those really generic that aren't really about buying a home, but are related, right? And then once they come back from the top of the funnel, we're in the middle of the funnel. That's when you start seeing those broad keywords, like in this example, homes for sale in Chicago or the homes for sale in New Hampshire, where they're not necessarily sure where in the state or kind of what they're looking for. They just know this is where I want to look. Once they kind of go through that stage and are looking at content through your site, then we move into the charging battery, where you're going to see the homes for sale near downtown Chicago with a view, or the waterfront homes in Ryan, New Hampshire with a dock. They're getting more specific. They've done the research. They kind of know more specifically where they want to live, what they're looking for. And I mean, the brokers that I talk to and a lot of content I've written has been, build your wish list, right? Like start by what do you want in a home and narrow it down from there. It's easier to know what to present to you when we know exactly what you're looking for. And when they are in that stage of identifying, I know I want this exact thing, they're a lot closer to that purchase stage, right? Because they know once they find a match to their wish list or their search, they're more likely to convert into that purchase because that's what they're looking for. And if you can provide that for them through content or listings, they're coming to you opposed to your competitor. So it's kind of 3 stages of content building that kind of feed into the funnel, that you're capturing them from the top of the funnel and leading them all the way to the purchase stage.
Absolutely, having everything they need for the entire process. And one interesting tidbit about this funnel is it's not uncommon for people to be 8 or 10 weeks out searching for properties before they even communicate with an agent or broker. So they are sizing you up based on how well you can serve them on your website before they do convert.
Yep. And the number two, I was just reading an article about how the number of homes people are looking at before they're ready to be in that purchase stage is actually expanding, because now they can look at the virtual tours, which we'll also get into, but they're able to kind of look more deeply at more homes. So we're seeing people looking at more homes before they're ready to reach out, which kind of saves them from having to make that trip out, like you said, Ron. That extra trip to kind of go through the process of looking at homes. They can do it all right from the comfort of their home. So we're seeing the number of homes that they're looking at before reaching out expanding as well.
Got it.
All right, on to the next one.
So kind of feeding into that middle of funnel and the bottom of funnel where we saw the homes for sale in Chicago versus the homes for sale in downtown Chicago, the more specific searches. So that first one would be a short tail keyword, right? It's 1 to 2 word phrases. They tend to be the most competitive. You know, if you were to search DC homes for sale, you're going to see tons of results. The cost per click on paid search is going to be astronomical compared to the longer searches, just because there's so much competition. The long tail are going to be those more complex strings, like the waterfront homes for sale in Rye with a dock. They have lower competition in the search engines, but the people that are searching those keywords and coming onto your site are more likely to convert because they're farther down in the funnel. So kind of how does this tie into getting buyers from out of state? You kind of have to have a mix, right? You need the short tail keywords to kind of get them when they're at top of funnel or middle of the funnel rather. You need those short keywords, but you also need the more complex long tail keywords to kind of bring them in when they're closer to that conversion point. So through your content, mixing in those phrases, the simple short tail keywords and the long tail together is kind of like the best way to go about organic content, is just making sure you have a combination of both so that you're ranking for both types of keywords for the content itself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and a good example of this is you may go out to purchase a vehicle and, biases aside, you're going to start your search by the type of vehicle. For example, I just recently bought a truck, and I started my search by asking Google what the number one truck was in 2020. And I watched a ton of reviews on multiple different dealers' websites, most of which weren't local, ironically. And so it looks like we have some work to do in Vermont. And as I become much more specific and intentional about my purchase, I started to narrow down my search. Then I searched Ram 1500, right? So now I'm probably right where it says 2020 Subaru, right? And then from there, I realized that I wanted the North Edition, which is a very specific package. So then I started to search 2020 Ram 1500 with a Hemi V8 and the North Edition package. And maybe, with leather interior. I don't like leather, but it's a good example. And I clicked on the website that popped up, which was Bocan here in Vermont, and I contacted them and made my purchase. So as Emily is alluding to, long tail is as important, if not more important, than short tail, and you can't displace your efforts. It needs to be equally spread across.
Yep. And also to note too, short tail keywords, they have higher search volume, right? So you might see more quantity of users coming to your site from the short tail keywords and fewer users coming from the long tail keywords, but it's not really about quantity, right? Like you could have 1,000 people come to your landing page on a listing, but if no one's converting, you're not making that sale, right? It really matters if we get, 2 people on that listing page and both of them are interested in placing an offer. That's obviously better in the long run than bringing in all those people. Like obviously we want to get those eyes in there, but at the end of the day, those long tail keywords, even though they might be bringing in fewer people, you're going to see the results a lot quicker and stronger with those long tail keywords.
Exactly.
Got it. Yeah, and I know how competitive the SEO in real estate is. It's especially because you have the big heavy players that are always ranking so high on that.
Definitely, and it's not impossible. And paid search can definitely help, and we'll get into paid search in a little bit. But as far as like your organic content, it's a really good idea to kind of mix the both strategies, right? And then the more keywords you have without overstuffing, the the more resources you have in your website that are linking to each other with the combination of short tail and long tail, the more kind of brand points you get from Google, right? So you'll end up ranking higher in the long run if you have more of that content with those keywords, and you can really be competitive when it can get so kind of oversaturated with those short tail keywords.
And not to get too in the weeds, but correct me if I'm wrong, Emily, but there is no shortcut for SEO.
No, it definitely takes time and effort. But when you put in that time and effort, you are going to stand out against Zillow and like Redfin and all of those big aggregators that don't have that content, that local touch, the human touch, that, you know, a local brokerage, whether it's a big brokerage or a small brokerage, is able to have.
Absolutely. We actually have a few websites. We'll keep them off the books in this webinar, but we have a few websites that actually outrank Zillow for a lot of keyword searches, which is remarkable, and anybody can achieve it if they have the right strategy.
Exactly. Okay, so now that we've talked about like how people are searching, now we can kind of get into the content, which is my bread and butter. It's what I spend 70% of my time doing at USM, is writing content for clients. And it's really important to focus on the voice you're using, right, when writing content for out-of-state buyers, because, and we can go to the next slide, because the way you're writing for someone who's from your area is going to be different than someone who's not from your area, right? Someone that's coming from a local buyer is going to know the nuances between like one neighborhood versus another, where someone from out of state might not know what neighborhood they want to live in. A great example of this is when so I live in Denver, originally from Vermont. I moved to Denver about 3 years ago. And when I was looking for a home, I had no idea what neighborhood I wanted to live in, right? I was like, I work remote, I don't have to commute anywhere. What is kind of like the best fit? So kind of through my own experience and, you know, doing my job, I kind of understand what kind of content you should be presenting to out-of-state buyers, right? So landing pages, blog posts, and videos are kind of like the three top. There's plenty of other content you guys can create on your own and drive out-of-state buyers, but these are kind of like the big players. So landing pages, like area information. So if your city is comprised of lots of really unique neighborhoods that people might not know which one they want to live in, that's a great page to create. If you do relocation services, that's something that should be prominently displayed in your main navigation, linking to, if you have like relationships with other brokerages across the country that help with relocation, making sure that that's linking, all that good stuff. Blog posts about relocating to the area, reasons to live in a specific location, things to know before moving there or closing up your second home. So for second home markets, like we have a lot of clients on Cape Cod, in Nantucket, and that sort of thing. Those sorts of blog posts of like, what should you know before moving to an island, right? Like, what are some things that you might not think of that would have an impact that someone looking for a house there should know before they kind of call you up? And making yourself known as, you know, that local knowledge source keeps you top of mind, keeps them coming back to your site because you've delivered on that information. And then videos, I find this personally really helpful as far as like neighborhood tours. You can get a really good sense of like what a neighborhood feels like through video opposed to text. Virtual home tours, which I know a lot of us are already doing because of COVID and the impact that it's had on showings. So having virtual home tours set up so people can view homes before they come out to visit. Video testimonials. So not only does that show that people enjoy working with you, it can be a great way to talk about how your services help them with a specific need, especially if they were coming from out of state. In the example to the right here, this is a client in Asheville. They do a lot of second homes. They're in the mountains. You can kind of see the mix. This is just one example. There's plenty of ways to go about this. They have some generic information about vacation homes in their area. They have a testimonial about finding your perfect vacation home. They talk about kind of what they offer as far as services to finding your second home. Like I said, lots of ways to go about making a landing page, but having that content that really asserts yourself as a resource for those out-of-state buyers is really important. And just making sure that you're delivering that information in a way that's speaking to someone who may not have ever been there, or who may have only been there a handful of times before, that isn't really sure what they're looking for, opposed to a local buyer that might have more of that insight as to kind of what makes things different in your area.
Got it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I think it makes a lot of sense to pay attention to the voice and the tone.
Definitely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and if I might interject, just to add a little bit of layer to this, is we talked a lot about how we're communicating through our website with all of this different information and content that we can provide to the client. But on Google's side, and Emily can speak even more to this, but it's extremely imperative that you have a lot of content around your community, and you're able to link several pages together to create this giant ball of mass and presence in your area, so that I guess a good example is like if you fling a rubber band at someone, right? It doesn't really have a lot of impact. They might say ow. Consider that one page of content for Asheville, North Carolina. But when you start building out all of these different pages and putting all these rubber bands together to create one big ball, well, if you throw that at someone, they're not going to ignore it. That's pretty impactful.
Exactly. And having it all linked together too, as you mentioned, Christian, like this is just one page on their site, right? We also have landing pages for every single one of the neighborhoods in Asheville, information on like how to choose a second home, like what are things that you should be aware of, how to close up your second home at the end of the season if you're moving out of state. It all kind of ties together, and making sure that everything's linking as well as possible. And Google loves to see everything kind of tied together. So
absolutely. Yeah. When Google finds the website or considers the website to be served up on a Google search, the more you have, the more obvious it is to Google that you are the right voice for the client.
Exactly. All right, so now we're going to get into paid search. While I think that a good, strong organic strategy is super important, paid search is a quicker and can be at times easier to get that initial push from out-of-state buyers in a more effective way, but they definitely go hand in hand. All right, so the nice things about paid search are that you can target specific locations. So thinking back to that map that we showed on the first slide, where it shows, Arizona and Colorado and Tennessee, those are great places to start showing your ads, right? Because people are already at least a little bit aware of your brand. So if they see something that has your name on it, they might be like, oh, I know them, or, bring them a little bit closer to that middle of funnel, bottom of funnel stage. Creating messaging in your ad that speaks to your target audience. So this example here, trade your shovel in for a pina colada on the shores of Florida. For our Florida clients, winter months are like a really busy time of year because no one wants to stay in Vermont when there's 4 feet of snow on the ground and it's miserable and negative 40 degrees. So having messaging that's specifically targeting those people that are already thinking, hey, I would love to move somewhere warm for the cold months, is a great way to get those conversions and clicks through to your site. The ability to turn your ads on and off. So this is kind of two-pronged, right? So if you are testing something, see it's not working, you can easily shut it off and update it, or just remove it. If you only want to run ads, if you're a Florida client, you only want to run ads in the winter to bring in those snowbirds, that's something that's easy to do. You don't always have to leave it on. You can adjust your budget as needed. And then the last point, easy to test results, right? So if we decided that, okay, we're going to send ads to all of those locations outside of New England from that map on the first page, let's see what's converting, what's not. And if we're seeing that, 2 states are having really strong conversions and 2 aren't, maybe it's worth either pushing your budget more into the states that are converting, pushing your budget into states that aren't converting. It's really easy to kind of tweak messaging, test to see how things are working. You don't have to kind of wait for that process of Google to crawl your site and see how you're ranking. When it comes to organic stuff, it's really easy to see those results in a month or 2.
Who created that ad?
So this is an ad that our team created. I wrote the copy, and then one of our designers just put it together as an example.
It's very good.
I will let our designer know you said that.
It's excellent. I'm ready to move.
Right?
I'm ready to click on search now.
Yeah, let's go.
Honestly, though, I'm like, every time it snows here, I'm like, I didn't go south enough. And then just a few notes to keep in mind about paid search. While it is super helpful, it isn't a one size fits all or perfect solution. So you don't want to try and target the entire country with your campaign. That can, number one, get really expensive. And also you're not as focused, right? If you're focusing on one or two things, um, you might be able to like have specific messaging targeting this. Like if I have a Florida client that's trying to target 3 different states, but only one of them gets snow regularly, then it's easier for me to kind of change up that messaging than if I have all 50 states kind of set up. That again can get really expensive. You can use Google's keyword planning tool to get an idea of like what your keywords will cost you. So in the AdWords platform, which is where you can run your Google ads, there's a tool that'll show you can look at historic metrics on like how many people are searching for those terms. You can see how much it's going to cost you to run those ads, and just kind of get a sense of like, what is the strategy really going to cost me in the long run. Things can obviously change and fluctuate, especially depending on seasonality, but can kind of give you a good base on what to expect. And then the last point is that we don't want to add a million keyword variations to capture all of that long tail keywords traffic, but they make it really easy with broad match, which Christian will get into, that allows you to target a lot of those long tail keywords without having to write them all individually down and bid on every single one of those keywords.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, perfectly said. And one other note about paid search, my whole philosophy on paid search is it's the jelly of the sandwich, right? Peanut butter would be SEO. Peanut butter sandwiches are great, right? And jelly sandwiches taste pretty good too. But peanut butter and jelly sandwiches are unrivaled against just a jelly or peanut butter sandwich. They're significantly more delicious, subjectively, of course. They work really well together. They complement each other, and they help each branch raise themselves higher. And one of the big reasons is because paid search is driving traffic to your website, right? Because clicks make Google money, so they're serving them up. They're making sure they're relevant, and they're making sure that they're spending your budget. And by getting visitors to your website, you're giving yourself relevance, which is helping lift up the content that you've already created on your website. So they really help each other out tremendously. Also, people are 50% more likely to click on your organic link with the information that you have on your website that you've written organically if you do have a paid advertisement in a position in Google, because it shows that you're more relevant.
Exactly.
Now, as far as broad match goes, I mean, really, Emily honestly articulated it very well. Basically, just having broad match keywords so that you can show up for more unique searches in paid search, and it kind of acts like SEO in a way where you can show up for a broad range of keywords as opposed to bidding on one long tail. Because if you bid on one long tail keyword search, well, you might capture 10 or 20 buyers or sellers or I should say visitors, right? But by having broad match, you're expanding your reach, similar to SEO, and you're expanding the reach of your website. Yeah.
Exactly. There's lots of different ways you can kind of modify these. If you have questions, your digital success specialist at Union Stream Media or one of our sales representatives would be more than happy to kind of walk through in more detail, just because it can get a little bit more in the weeds, and obviously depends based on your market area, where you're trying to target, and all of that good stuff. But just because kind of as an overarching theme, I just wanted to touch on it and the importance of broad match when it comes to these searches.
Mm-hmm. So Rob, based on all of that, are you more likely to eat a peanut butter and jelly sandwich?
Yes, I am a peanut butter and jelly sandwich guy. Sometimes peanut butter and chocolate too.
Oh, I had the craving the other day for peanut butter and fluff sandwiches, which I haven't had since I was a small child. Lots of different things to go with peanut butter, I think, is the lesson here.
That's right. Fluff can be video, and Nutella or chocolate can be retargeting, right? Everything. SEO is the foundation right? And everything else on top of it is the structure. And because without good SEO and good content and relevance, your paid ads won't do that well.
Exactly.
Of course, that's subjective, but our data shows that paid ads don't do as well without SEO. Just like video, right? Video and all the other channels of marketing, they feed off of content.
Exactly. Google really looks at the base, the foundation of your website to determine whether you're a reliable source or not. So if you don't, like Christian said, if you don't have that foundation, they're kind of like, well, I mean, I guess we could serve the video, but you're going to do a lot better if you have that strong background. They're like, oh, these people know what they're talking about. We're going to rank them a little bit higher.
Exactly. And when you consider that that a large margin of searches that happen every single year have never been searched before, it's imperative that you have a broad spectrum of information on your website so you can get consideration for those searches and attract those people.
Exactly. All right. So now that we've talked about the how, we should probably touch on the why you should be targeting out-of-state buyers. And I mean, there's several different reasons, right? So the search data, like we touched on earlier, indicates that people are looking to move away from larger cities to smaller, more rural communities. We know that people are looking to change states based on either being able to work remote, maybe they need to change jobs, but we know that people are searching from out of state. So why leave those people on the table, right? The more people you can drive to your website, the more likely you are to make that sale. That's what every good realtor wants, right? Is to make a sale at the end of the day. And then also for our clients, like you're investing in a platform that can touch all of North America. Like, do you really want to restrict yourself to the 2 counties where people already know you? If you're bringing in more buyers, that drives up sale prices, all that good stuff. You're expanding your brand reach and just driving, like I said, additional traffic and bringing in additional revenue in the long run. Never hurts, right?
Right. Revenue is good.
Yes.
Yeah. So what I've gathered is that there's really no detractors to this other than time invested.
Yeah, and I know there has been some discussion in some communities right now with everything going on with the pandemic, like, do we really want out-of-state people coming here? But I don't think that this is something that's just limited to today, right? Like, this is something that's going to be relevant and impactful, in the long run too. So I don't think that we should just pigeonhole ourselves into like this specific time period, but thinking, for the future as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a perfect example of that is that we have a client that, to not be named, that is currently retired but still has a real estate website because they show up for every lake search in New Hampshire, and they just take referral fees. But if anybody who's watching this video is interested, if you search waterfront homes for sale in a specific lake in New Hampshire, you'll find the website. And you'll understand what I'm talking about. And that's because their organic presence is unmatched. There's just so much content. It's been there for so long, and it's so unique and rich that it gets so much traffic that Google's just like, it's a no-brainer. We have to put them on the search results.
Yep. That's everything from us today on out-of-state buyers. But if you have any